So, many folks have claimed to play tall in Crusader Kings 3. They have, through their gameplay, evangelized the path of tall play to the masses. I've seen the videos, I've watched the people play tall, I've seen the Reddit posts. Your claims of playing tall have left your dedication to the tall way of life in question, my friends. How can you claim to follow the path of ascension, literally, when you betray the very notion with what you call playing tall? Maybe you believe you've played tall, but have you ever really, truly played tall with all your heart and soul? Some people watch the development number hit 100 and believe they are indeed playing tall. They're pretenders. They are clowns. They have never experienced the ecstasy of height. They don't know what it truly means to play tall. You think development is the only measure of playing tall? You need to elevate your thinking. Let me open your mind. This is the ultimate playing tall guide for Crusader Kings 3, and once you've watched it, you will have no reason to ever click on another playing tall video. Today's video starts off with the master of height himself, Haesteinn. He's not particularly tall right now, but he may yet sire a lineage of tall chads that will look down upon the rest of the world from their Everest thrones. Let's get into it. While Haesteinn here makes his way into the Pyrenees Mountains, I want to talk about the philosophy of playing tall. It's not about making money and avoiding conquest, like some kind of pacifist lump. It's about modifier stacking. If you're coming from Europe Universalis 4, you know just what I'm talking about. It's all about stacking those development modifiers to get the edge on the other folks around you. That's an obvious enough piece of playing tall philosophy, but what's been missing is the true height of playing tall. I'm referring to physical space. I'm referring to actually ending up at a higher location on the map. The goal for today, which I've so expertly obfuscated, is that we're playing tall by conquering Mount Everest and developing it to 100 development while also becoming masters of living in mountains. Crusader Kings 3 is a game with near infinite possibilities if you're willing to get to work, so that's why we're invading the Pyrenees Mountains. The Basque culture has the Mountaineers cultural tradition, and I want that tradition for my culture, so I'll be conquering them, offering them a cultural hybridization, and then promptly leaving to siphon the culture from yet another mountain-born people. I want to be clear that this video is not so much of a close-up how to play CK3 guide. I'm assuming that you know what cultural traditions are and what development is and so on. Nonetheless, I will explain the rationale behind each strategy I use to achieve the goal of playing tall. The initial war against Navarra is a reign adventure into Saracusta, since it has the most counties, and will act as our base of operations for a bit. We're going to culture convert one county here to Norse so that my culture will border their culture and help get acceptance. From here, I'm going to conquer as many Basque counties as I can, and grant any that make me go above my domain limit to a local Basque ruler. For each Basque vassal I have, I'll gain acceptance, and I can use them for a grand tour target, more on that later. As Haesteinn, you're extremely militarily talented, so you can win any war with one solid group of Varangians. Because you're an adventurer trait-wise, you can pay very little money for army maintenance too, so don't be afraid of any enemy that's nearby. In the case of my invasion of Andalusia here, they're so busy with all their other wars that I can win the war with very little combat at all. Once you win, any Basque counties go to a local Basque lord, and the rest you hand out to Norse characters until you're back at your domain limit. Continue the conquests in Basque territory as opportunities come up. As you wait, feel free to raid and make some money. Since we won't be investing any cash into this land, as we intend to leave, the economy could be in some danger. Make up any economic gaps with raiding as necessary, and once you have at least 3 Basque vassals and enough money for it, start up a grand tour, visiting all of your Basque vassals with a cultural festival. During your tour, take every opportunity to increase cultural acceptance, and then, once you're above 20% acceptance, make a hybrid culture. If, for whatever reason, your hybrid process is going slowly, that county you've been working on culture converting might help speed things up, in case you're needing just a few more percents of acceptance. Regardless, the only required cultural traditions for this run are coastal warriors, malleable invaders, and mountaineers. You could let the rest go, but why not keep them, right? I chose to let go of ting meat, which isn't very useful anyway. I named this culture Fiskimother, which is Google translated Icelandic for fisherman. I picked that name because the Basques are famously talented fishers. It's hilarious because my fisherman culture has no coastline. I guess they're river fishermen. Once you've got your culture, head east by conquest, but don't do a Varangian adventure. Adventures cost more and more prestige the more you declare, and eventually, if we spam it, it'll be too expensive. Just do regular conquests until you get to about Crete. If you can reach Alania, great, but if not, you may have to conquer some little pieces of land from anyone that looks weak nearby. Be careful not to border Alania because you can't adventure to a realm bordering your realm. Now, the Alans don't have any cultural traditions we want. In fact, we're here to get the Caucasian wolves tradition from the Georgians. However, we're planning ahead here by adventuring to Alania first. When we win the war against the Alans, we'll return to being tribal, since the Alans were tribal. As a tribe, we can embrace the nomadic way of life. We need to be a nomad in order to easily access the Karluk culture later, which has both mountain homes and sacred mountains, both of which will be critical to our build. Regardless, once you're a nomad, we begin the build-up of our power. If you set your game rules right, then making a hybrid on a culture has a 25-year cooldown, in the sense that a culture must be 25 years old to be used for a hybrid. By default it's 50 years, but there's a game rule that lowers that to 25. That means we have about 20 or so years to build up before we need to hybridize with the Georgians, or else risk falling behind schedule. Well, I say that, but ultimately CK3 is a long game, and there's really no rush to get all this done. You can just take things casually and enjoy the nomad experience for a bit if you want. In terms of getting strong as a nomadic Viking, it's a combination of migrating to the high fertility counties around the steppes when possible, and raiding with the distinct advantage of your long ships. Most nomads can't raid overseas, but you can, so go over to Egypt or something and make huge money. Bonus strategy for you, the game allows you to change your raid intent while in neutral territory, so go ahead and use the adventure raid intent to avoid attrition, and then, while sailing back home, swap over to plunder, which normally massively reduces your raid speed, but gives extra rewards. Well, you still get the rewards when you return home if your intent is plunder when you arrive in your domain, so put that on, go home and get huge rewards. Once I got my dominance up, I asserted it and became the suzerain of much of the former Khazar Khaganate, although that wouldn't last very long, nor would it be very valuable. Without fertility, I won't be making much herd no matter how many tributaries I have. I migrated to Turkmenia, where the fertility was much higher, and sat around building up some herd for a bit, which I invested into my buildings. You might be thinking that we're just here for Georgian cultures, so we could just conquer them now and make the hybrid, but remember, we're also here for Karluk culture, and Haesteinn won't live forever. We're setting up for the eventuality of our extremely talented ruler's death, and the need to continue the fight afterwards. In order to massively increase my fertility, I built up the camels in my millet storage, which let me basically just set up shop here in Oazil. I made almost 100 herd per month, which drops to about 65 as the fertility hits equilibrium. I could get more by migrating, but the cost of migrating won't be worth the benefit when I can just sit here and make this much herd passively. In July of 901, I've got enough power, and I'm coming up on the hybrid culture cooldown, so I went to war with Abkhazia to conquer them entirely. Just like with the Basques, I made a Georgian vassal for each county, and then did a grand tour to visit them all with cultural festivals. With that, I had over 20% acceptance, so I made my next hybrid culture. This is the Fjalgong mode of the culture, which is Google translated Icelandic for mountain men, or mountaineers, or some other such term. I swapped out the Northern Stories tradition for Caucasian wolves, and now I have access to the pretty good but really expensive Manaspa unit, and we can start thinking about the Karluks. The Karluks are much further to the east, and I'm too weak without Haesteinn to just go throw my weight around, so I'm going to use Haesteinn's talents to help advance my power growth. I'll be humiliating the current Karluk Khan to steal a bunch of his herd, which will jump me right up to the next level of dominance. One great thing about being a foreigner to the steppe is that we have access to onagers. Torchbearers work fine, but onagers really destroy what little fortifications exist on the steppe. Haesteinn took the Oghuzil throne in December of 906, becoming king of the mountain men and their Turkic tributaries. Shortly after, the heroic Varangian passed away, as his son, Ragnar Haesteinsson, took the throne in September of 908. Haesteinn absolutely can live longer, but I don't necessarily need him to. Ragnar is ready for the throne, and he's got a solid herd to back him up, alongside a loyal Kurultai. At Ragnar's coronation, he swore an oath to ensure peace, which is a curious choice for a warmongering steppe lord, but he promised just 5 years of peace, which is a flap of a butterfly's wing when considering how long we'll be ruling. I actually discovered another insane bug in coronations while doing this playthrough having to do with oaths. This bug almost makes me like coronations in a way. Turns out that if you migrate as a nomad, you lose your kingdom title, which is to be expected, but when you arrive at your new spot, you regain a new kingdom title. Well, guess what? You now need to be coronated again, and that also means you can take a new oath. Amazing, isn't it? For my second oath, I'm going to expand the realm. We live in a world of complex paradoxes, as Ragnar, son of Haesteinn, has promised that the realm will be wrapped in a peaceful blanket, while also expanding in size by about 50%. Of course, the plan is to just maintain peace, finish that oath, and go expand the realm. Simple enough. You'll notice that where I migrated to is a bunch of mountains, and that's intentional. I built all those camel buildings, sure, so a desert would be better, but I get men-at-arms stationing bonuses in the mountains. I was thinking I'd need to go do a bunch of war towards the east to get access to the Karluks, but soon I'm going to have a revelation that makes this playthrough even easier. For now, I'll be resolving various county issues and just getting more powerful with well over 100 herd per month joining the flock. Ragnar completed his peaceful oath in September of 913, and with his promise fulfilled, he immediately went to war to expand the realm in the name of his other oath. I don't really need more land, but I have 7 domain limits, so I might as well get more grazing land and fulfill my oath too. It was after conquering a couple counties in the west that I remembered how culture for nomadic counties work. The ruler of a county and a nomadic government determines the culture of their county, so if I grant land to a Karluk, their land will become Karluk. Guess who has some leftover Karluk men as prisoners of war from that old humiliation against the Karluk Khanate? If you guessed me, you guessed right. I granted them land, and now I have Karluk culture right here in my realm. Well, after a little while I did. I don't know why, but sometimes the culture change doesn't happen right away. By June of 916, the culture swapped over to Karluk, and I could have gone for a grand tour, but then Ragnar died kind of unexpectedly. Nothing happened really, he was just in his 50s, and I guess that's kind of old for the medieval period. Haesteinn does live unnaturally long compared to the normal humans of CK3 after all. Say hello to the boy king, Haesteinn II, who will be educated by his Samaritan Khazar caravan master, Sibel Longshanks. She was chosen for her personality combo of diligent, ambitious, and honest. In terms of passing the time as a nomad kid, I'll just be meeting with peers and accepting that I can't do much. I do want to go raiding, but honestly I'm running into some income issues. I'd normally rely on doing nergas for money, but obviously I can't do that as a child. There was the occasional nomad uprising here and there, which is actually a good thing since the leaders of nomad uprisings are amazingly skilled characters and you can recruit them after the war. Check out Toli here in August of 923. He's an amazing commander with great traits and he only kinda dislikes me. He'll be a great knight or a commander that could try to replace Haesteinn's legendary commander skills. In August of 926, Haesteinn II came of age, a mastermind philosopher, which is great. Learning helps the fertility and in some Nerga events it's an important stat, so hopefully it'll help us get out of debt. I had an almost perfect Nerga on my first try, fishing the realm out of debt and setting a solid start for the rule of this young man. I got him betrothed to Hualun Borgajan, a Mongol giantess, and this is where I must introduce the third aspect of playing tall. There's the metaphorical sense, to increase development, to avoid conquest, to die of boredom as you sit in your pile of money. There's the locational sense, which is to find a mountain and reach its peak, achieving a tall playthrough genuinely. Finally, the last piece of this holy trinity, true height, the physical sense. One must stand tall to play tall. I haven't yet gotten the giant trait into my lineage, but with this Mongol girl, I may yet begin to have true tall chads that can make Everest look like a hurdle. Okay, that's very unlikely. The mountain is extremely tall, but you know, it sounds more epic if I frame it that way. From here I just kept hosting Nergas to make some money and waited for the Karluk culture to gain acceptance. It's going surprisingly quickly considering all I've got are a few vassals to give passive acceptance. I finally got the money to host a proper coronation in May of 929, and for this one I picked the Greatest Hunter Oath, which is a pretty tough one. 10 successful hunts or 1 legendary hunt within 40 years. Back in my day, when coronations first came out, that was a couple days ago, it was 10 hunts or 3 legendary hunts within 20 years. Look at how much easier life has gotten for the kids these days with their day 1 patches. Imagine. Anyway, I made a hybrid with the Karluks, which I called Slitbui. Google translated Icelandic for plains dweller or plainsfolk or whatever. Ironic considering how specialized for mountains this culture is, but appropriate because I took Turkic heritage. This culture is really looking like a proper mountain culture now, and thus it's coming time that we make our way to Nepal and elevate our physical position in the world. To start, I'm migrating further southeast to try and get in range of the Nepali kingdom, and I found some beautiful mountains on the edge of the Tian Shan or Tengritokh mountain range. I'm hoping to continue hunting for my oath and perhaps to take a new one since I'm a new king awaiting a new crown after my migration. I want more money before settling down in Nepal so I can have a strong start there and not have to worry about being potentially conquered in my time of weakness. I had my second coronation as Haesteinn II in April of 935, where I swore to expand the realm. I didn't really spot any interesting oaths, so I just took it because it'll be easy to fulfill. I amassed about 300 gold after some raids and Nergas, and used that money in December of 937 to begin the invasion of Nepal. The Nepalis have the last cultural tradition that I need to be the ultimate tall Chad, and that's of course Himalayan settlers. It gives a development bonus to mountain counties and a unique unit. Very cool. There are other mountain-based traditions out there, but surprisingly few. There's mountain herding, which the Yemenis and Bhutar have. It only gives bonuses to desert mountains, not regular mountains, so it won't be useful in Nepal, but it does give access to a pretty good light infantry unit. There's also the Somalian, Beja, and Afar tradition of mountain skirmishing, which does give bonus levies and supply in mountains, but we kind of already have mountaineers and Caucasian wolves for that, and the build I have in mind uses 7 total tradition slots. To fit an 8th one, I'd have to wait until 1200 for the late medieval period, and I'm good on that, bro. I also almost forgot about mountaineer ruralism, exclusive to the Slovaks and Czechs, which gives a very small development bonus to mountains and hills. There is also something to be said for the ancient miners tradition from Cornwall, which gives bonuses to quarries, which of course there will be many of in a kingdom of mountains. Again, not enough slots to fit it all though. I will say it would have been even more Chad to have 8 cultural traditions, all of which are just mountain focused. Anyway, after easily navigating the Tibetan plateau, the army arrived at Kathmandu and quickly occupied it in November of 939. After a few more occupations and a climactic battle at Bhaktapur, the war came to an end and Everest fell into the hands of its rightful tall Chad rulers. Now we begin the rise to new heights in our playing tall adventure. Nepal is a new land, and one which the plainsmen are not used to, but certainly have an affinity for, considering their immense mountain-based cultural traditions. Haesteinn II had his third coronation in Kathmandu, where he made yet another oath. He promised to ensure peace, just like his father, and that should be pretty easy considering that the Haesteinn lineage is one totally dedicated to making life in Nepal prosperous. Unfortunately, he still has his hunting oath to fulfill, which has been tough to make work. Sometimes, even when a hunt looks like it'll work, it just fails anyway. Very sad. In June of 945, Haesteinn made a trip to the local university in Bengal. He's hoping to become someone truly learned so that he can study and understand the world around him. He often finds himself looking upwards, towards the peaks of Everest, and wondering what's up there. The only way to find out is to climb it, but he can't possibly do that. Instead, the city of Kathmandu shall develop its way, one point of development at a time, all the way up the mountain, until the throne of the Himalayas sits atop the very peak. This is the goal Haesteinn has outlined for himself, and he knows already that it is not a project he can achieve in his lifetime, but he will charge his heirs with the task. Now, I'm pretty sure that in real life, Mount Everest isn't quite where Kathmandu is, but like, I don't know, it's around here, right? Can we call it close enough if the county of Kathmandu gets 100 development? I'd appreciate the leeway, thank you. Anyway, this is where we start playing tall in the more traditional sense, and that means that not a whole lot is going to happen gameplay-wise. I attended some other people's coronations, and I hosted some hunts here and there, but I'm mostly just sitting around and waiting. My plan with all these learning perks is to live for a long time and build up the piety to reform a faith. Obviously, I can't reform a Satru since those holy sites are way out of reach, but there's a local faith in Nepal that has some pretty good holy sites which I can use to create a religion that perfectly suits my goals. The Kiratists and Yumaists are the local Nepali folklore faiths which are still around in small numbers today, and although their tenets don't interest me, I can reform them to have whatever tenets I want. Despite all the lack of interesting stuff going on here, I did have the momentous joy of Haesteinn II's second son being born in March of 950. Everest Haesteinsson is here, the first member of the lineage to be a giant, making him the first true tall Chad we've got so far. I named him Everest for pretty obvious reasons, but I like to think it's because Haesteinn wanted him to grow to be as tall as the mountain he wanted to climb. Afterwards, he took a look at Europe, and things are looking weird for sure. Carpathia is an empire that seems to be in collapse, albeit a slow one, and much of Europe sits in turmoil. There is a pretty big Denmark that seems to be doing well though. Beyond that, I was working hard to achieve my hunting oath. I got a legendary sighting in June of 951 and went after the beast, but sadly failed. I'll have to try again later and hope I get it next time. In May of 953, I did indeed get the beast. With a spear in the heart, the white boar of Bhaktapur was slain and its pelt hung in the Himalayan court. A little while later, in April of 955, Haesteinn became a poet as he wrote lines about his ambitions to climb Everest and his love of hunting God's many creatures. Poet is a holy trait for Satru, so that's pretty neat. In between rounds of building up stuff in my holdings, I went on raids into Bengal, which is super rich. Because my army is composed of powerful units like Varangians, Manaspa, and horse archers, the Indians have absolutely no chance of defeating me, so it's all just free money. Nonetheless, spreading my army out so widely to raid is not very tall behavior, so I'll be cutting that out later on, as the economy becomes more self-sufficient. I grabbed a peculiar tradition for my culture in July 958, and that's devoted horsemanship. See, to my mind, the height of a man is limited by his legs, is it not? Well, with the right horse, a man can become even taller than he'd otherwise be, so for that reason, our mountain Vikings of Nepal need horses that can support their immense size. I like to think that Haesteinn II, with his huge learning stat, has begun breeding gigantic horses that we would continue to refine until he gets the perfect horse, which can only be mounted by giants like his son, Everest. Haesteinn did a similar breeding program type thing with his son, Everest, as he found the boy a beautiful Indian giantess, Veata Tatun, whose largeness should ensure the future generations of the Haesteinn lineage remain big and strong, like the horses of Nepal. In August of 970, yes, we skipped a lot of time, it was all just raids and building stuff, Haesteinn converted to the Kirati faith, and although a total newcomer to it, he reformed it to suit his needs. The obvious choice is Chthonic redoubts, and from there, I mulled over the other options. I kind of wanted to take ritual cannibalism for the fun of like man-eating giants from the peak of Mount Everest, but then I remembered that I'm playing tall. That means I have to be as boring as possible, so I took pacifism. Now I can't raid anymore, but I've got enough money and income that I'm not worried about maintaining an economy anymore. I also took communal possessions because now we're a culture and faith of nice people. You see, all that raiding from before was just an attempt at sharing the wealth with the people that really needed it. The Bengalis were rich, the Himalayans were poor, simple as. The big benefit of doing this with regards to actually playing tall strategies is the grand temples that I can now build, which will, until we get windmills and watermills, essentially carry my economy. I don't know why exactly, but the head of faith, a woman named Gloth, ended up being Norse instead of our mountain-oriented culture, and I thought it would be kind of fun to give her a directive to spread her culture around. That means we'll have, in good time, Norse culture just sitting beside this immense perversion of its own self. Very fun. After getting devoted horsemanship, I finalized my culture with a Nepalese hybrid. The Fjallarisur culture, mountain giants in Google translated Icelandic, came to be in October of 973. With that, we have 5 mountain-oriented traditions plus devoted horsemanship. In theory, we could add mountaineer ruralism and desert mountain traditions from Yemen and Somalia, but like I said, that would be a huge pain, and there are no desert mountains here anyway. Shortly after, I founded a witch coven, as I'd made witches virtuous in reformed curatism. The witch coven isn't super useful, but you know, it's something. Might as well add it in, right? More importantly, I renamed the Kingdom of the Himalayas to Jotunheim, since this is indeed the home of the giants now. Thanks OPB for giving me the idea. We're into the final stage of this playthrough now, which is unfortunately the one where we have to wait for technology so we can actually play tall properly. Right now, I've got every building down that I can get. Everything is upgraded, everything is built, there's nothing more to do. I need to wait until at least 1050 to unlock the next era and start making the big stuff like windmills. So the next almost century is going to be summarized by a ruler. Haesteinn II passed away in February of 992 after 75 years of rulership. His heir was Everest I, who took the throne without any partitions despite having brothers, and that's because I made him co-king, which sets him as heir, while also putting feudal elective laws on my duchy titles. If the duchy is voted to go to a character, all the counties within it also go to that character. I'm the only elector in the duchy, so my vote instantly wins. Hence, I basically have primogeniture succession with appointed heirs by simply choosing a co-king and electing that guy for my duchies. Everest I is a stewardship-oriented ruler, and for his coronation, he made an oath to support the champions. The building this gives isn't nearly as good as it once was, but it's still okay, I guess. That and I just wanted to try something new. He put down a legendary shrine in April of 1006, which I was lucky enough to unlock after finishing a level 1 Holy Legend. Everest I also engaged in war for the first time in decades as he attacked the Raj of Mahendrapalad, which ruled the land that belonged to the Jotunheim kingdom. It was a surprisingly hard-fought war as the Indians had good commanders and elephants, but while fighting in mountains, Everest absolutely dominated. That war ended in August of 1012 with victory, and then was followed up with another war for the last piece of the kingdom. As that war began, Everest I passed away at the age of 62. His rule was relatively eventful considering the tall playstyle, and yet it felt so empty compared to how I usually play. In his place, Everest II ascends the throne. He's also a giant, of course, and so he will lead the war against the Pratiharas of Delhi. The Pratiharas are a much harder foe, and indeed they demonstrated that when in April of 1013, they completely wiped my army while I wasn't looking. I guess my army kinda sucks if it's not in the mountains. You hate to see it. I hired some mercenaries, let the army reinforce, and then went at them again, this time claiming many great victories, and eventually ending the war with a victory in April of 1018. Check out the cultural regions of Nepal now. By July of 1019, that Norse cultural directive paid off, and so we have Nepali West Nepal, Norse Central Nepal, and Fjallarisur East Nepal with a tiny sliver of Kirati culture at the edge of the kingdom. After the war, Everest II had his coronation in January of 1021, where he made an oath to foster enlightenment. This is the one that can add a university to a county, and we have 50 years to do it, so either Everest dies or we complete it, as I doubt he'll live beyond 90. In order to fulfill its requirements, Everest went to university where he studied very hard. His hard work paid off, although it stressed him, but we don't actually have any counties over 30 development, which we can use to complete the oath yet, so that stinks. What stinks even more is that the combination of Everest II's war wounds and brain damage from studying economics resulted in his untimely death, leaving the realm in the hands of Everest III. Now, Everest III is someone young enough that he actually might be able to reign for more than a decade and change. He took the same oath as his father during his coronation in April of 1025, and then caught the measles, at which point I thought perhaps he'd be churning through yet another Everest, but he survived, losing his face in the process. When it comes to lifestyle, Everest III is a militarily educated king, but I focused on the traveling lifestyle so I could do inspections. Inspections are very good for getting development quickly in your realm before you can stack windmills and other stuff for passive development, so we'll be relying on successful inspections to get enough development to actually make a university. He conducted his first inspection in September of 1028, which ended with an inconclusive outcome. On a successful development inspection, you gain 50% of a development point, and you can do an inspection every 2 years, albeit you can only visit the same county once every 5 years. That plus 50 progress to the next development point adds up fast though, and is a nice boost to your development trickle. Nonetheless, check out the development growth in Keski as of November of 1029. The steward is helping, sure, but we're getting 6% of a development point every month right now. That's about 1 development every year and a half or so. Everest III had his first successful inspection in Keski in December of 1033, where we can see how good the development bonus is. Look at all those flat development modifiers. You can tell how tall we've been playing from how good the income is at this point. Look at that, almost 30 gold per month. In December of 1039, Everest got the Inspector trait, which also gives development growth similarly to Scholar, and with that, I hit 26 development in Keski by April of 1040. We're almost at that magic 30 for the University Oath. Kathmandu itself hit 30 development shortly after in October of 1042, but I can't put a university there because it's already a grand temple. Nonetheless, that's a third of the way there to the peak of Everest, right? We hit the year 1050 finally, and with it we began advancing to the next era. The High Medieval era is where the late game of CK3 sort of begins. More the mid game I guess, but the economic late game begins there because you unlock windmills and workshops and higher level duchy buildings, as well as several building slots. Tribal era and early medieval era economics are very small, but the High Medieval era is a time of vast wealth. In July of 1055, Everest attended university to try and get a max level education so he could found the university in Kaski. He succeeded, becoming an exalted warlord and fulfilling his oath with a new university. Universities are extremely good, and anything that adds more to the game is super strong. This might be one of the best oaths in the game, although getting a level 5 education trait can be a bit touch and go at times. In April of 1058, I added the obvious cultural tradition of Industrious, which could have sent my development to the moon if I'd gotten it earlier. Alas, I genuinely forgot it existed until this moment, and that just goes to show how poorly suited I am to playing tall. Nonetheless, I maintain that this is the only true way to play tall. Check out the Latin Empire over here in April of 1061, by the way. Very cool, Catholics, very cool. By the way, after getting a scholar in February of 1063, these are Everest III's stats. Not bad, right? Also, the name Ladder Legs is really funny, I won't lie. I also used the itinerary decision from the inspection perk tree to make this amazing book for my personal inventory. The domain of Maharaja Everest gives flat development in mountains alongside advantage and travel speed. That's insanely good for what we're doing here because remember, 0.1 isn't much, but it's going to be modified massively by all the percentage modifiers that my cultural traditions are putting onto it. As of January of 1066, a few months before William the Conqueror's start date, Kathmandu is at 39 development, which is insane. Anyway, I'm spending a whole lot of time just describing numbers going up, so I'll freely tell you that Everest III did basically nothing else beyond spamming inspections and watching the development pile up. In November of 1084, Kathmandu hit 47 development, and it'll just keep escalating. In case you're wondering about all these modifiers, which I know you are, here they are as of July of 1085. Just take all that in. You see what I mean about how that 0.1 from that random itinerary I got is going to be way bigger? As you can see, the measly minus 25% development growth from the mountains here are quite meaningless in the face of mountain homes, Himalayan settlers, and the other development bonuses you see there. One of them just says the name of my culture. I'm not even sure where that's coming from, but yeah, just an insane litany of numbers. Everest III finally passed away in November of 1095, leaving his throne to his giantess granddaughter, Samida, who I afterwards renamed to Everest. Sadly, because she's a woman, she goes back to being Everest I instead of becoming Everest IV, but anyway, she's been tasked with completing the journey to the top of Mount Everest, the task which her lineage had been charged with over a century ago. At the start of her reign, Everest I II has 54 development in Kathmandu, which is already huge, but she needs more. Here's the thing though, I'm not joking with you, I'm doing literally nothing but inspections and the occasional pilgrimage to pass the time. Look at my income, look at my money, look at my prestige and piety. With mountain homes and sacred mountains, you get prestige and piety for every building you make in a mountain county, and of course, I'm building non-stop until there are no more building slots. Despite me presenting this as being boring, there is an allure to watching the number go up. Everest I II took her throne in November of 1095 with Kathmandu at 54 development. To get an idea of how insane this growth is, here's April of 1145, 50 years later, minus a few months. We're at 97 development in Kathmandu. Yes, that's right, the first queen of Jotunheim has taken the great city of Kathmandu from halfway up to Everest to damn near the peak. She hit 99 development in November the next year, and then, with a triumphant roar from the top of Mount Everest, did Everest I, queen of Jotunheim, the giantess to peak Mount Everest, reach 100 development in Kathmandu, and place her throne atop the snowy peak of Earth's highest point. She was wearing a crop top, so it was pretty cold, but she didn't care. This is what it means to fulfill an oath, as her people came here in November of 939 with a promise to climb the mountain. She even took her favorite giant horse to the peak so she could mount it and get just a few more feet into the sky. Some say at the very peak atop her horse, she could see into the heavens, but was unimpressed with God's lack of development, so she promptly returned to the actual paradise that she'd built for herself on Earth. Well, here it is. Everest conquered. Here's the development of other usually well-developed places on the map. Rome is around 60, Byzantium is 51, Mecca is at an impressive 59, and nowhere else really stands out to me here. Anyway, this has been the ultimate Crusader Kings 3 playing tall guide. Remember the holy trinity of playing tall. Oppose wide play and blobbing. Be on top of a mountain, and be tall, including mounting other tall creatures to add height. I hope this helps you play tall in your Crusader Kings 3 gameplay. Also, quick apology to the channel members here. I didn't really find any good opportunities to add your names to things. I could have maybe renamed some counties, I guess, but I don't know. Nothing felt appropriate to rename in this run. Don't worry, we'll be back to renaming things soon. Thank you for your time.